Broken glass everywhere. People pissing in the stairs like they just don't care. Can't take the smell, can't take the noise. Got no money to move out. I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back. Junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. Tried to run away, but I couldn't get far, 'cause a man with a tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me, 'cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. Times it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. So it sounds like some people are familiar with this album. The Message by Grandmaster Flash. My name is Sam Seidel. I'm the presenter, by the way. I'm not just a dude who walked in and read the sign that said hip-hop ed and thought he should start rapping. I'm the director of something called the Student Experience Lab at the Business Innovation Factory. And I'm about to ask you all to introduce yourselves, so I was going to model it by just sharing that one of my earliest hip-hop culture memories is my dad coming home with this record. He was a teacher. Both my parents were teachers in public high schools in the Boston area. And his students had told him that he should check this out. So he got it and brought it home. And I heard it. I was about 4 years old, maybe 4.5. And to me, it was like just this next step from Dr. Seuss to this. Like the rhymes, but it was talking about things that I was seeing going on in the world around me, even at a young age, growing up in an urban environment, and trying to make sense of. And here was Melly Mel telling these stories and giving social commentary that really resonated with me, and it was stuff that I wasn't hearing in the mainstream media and whatnot. So that, I'll share more about my history and perspective on hip-hop and education, but for now, just to model, that's an early memory I have of my relationship with hip-hop culture. Around that same time, by the way, I started rapping myself. That's me on the mic, I think 5 years old. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my story of how I began doing that. Was it Nicole, the English teacher? So similarly, I'm trained as an English teacher. And I did my student teaching in a juvenile prison in Providence, Rhode Island, right outside of Providence, Rhode Island. And going in, I had a lesson plan that had been approved by my mentor teachers and professors at Brown University, where I was a student. And basically what happened is I lost control of the class from the beginning. It was only 12 students, because that was the limit in this facility and how many young men could be in a class. And it was gender segregated, so I was just working with young men at the time. And I was trying to ask them a set of questions that I had prepared, but I had people just kind of having side conversations. I had people slap boxing. There was a file cabinet in the back of the room that I had been told not to let anybody go near, that somebody was going through. And then there was a couple young men who were up front, and they kind of flipped it on me. And I'll talk more about flipping things, because that's a big thing in hip-hop culture. They had kind of flipped it on me, and they were asking me questions, like where was I from, and did I have a girlfriend, and what kind of music did I like? And they were very intrigued when I said I liked rap music, and they were tickled when I said that I thought I could rap. So immediately they were like, we need to hear this right now. And at the time, I was in college, and I fancied myself to be quite the MC. I mean, I've been rapping, as you can see, for, like 15 years at that point. And so I started freestyling, which is improvisational rap. I was just making up rhymes about whatever was going on in the room, probably about how I was the greatest rapper ever, like the kind of things that people rap about. And there was just this incredible shift of energy in the room when that happened. All that attention that I had been so desperate for and felt like I needed and didn't know how to get, all of a sudden I had, almost effortlessly, just from making something up on the spot. And there was a shift in the power dynamic in the room, because the young men in the group, some of them came up and formed what we call a cipher. Like they got in a circle with me at the front of the room, and other people started rhyming, and everyone was able to bring their voice into this conversation. And even the young men who weren't really rapping still came up because they wanted to hear. So all of a sudden I had the entire class in this focused circle where I felt like anything could happen. So for me, that was a major aha moment, a turning point in my work as a teacher, because I started to say, there's something really, really powerful here. Like I can use it for teaching poetry, but there's something even deeper going on than just the because a lot of times people talk about hip-hop education, they're being very literal and literary. They're like thinking about rap lyrics. How can I use rap lyrics and compare it to opera or compare it to Shakespeare is something that I've done when I taught in the prison. there's all of that, but I realized that there's something much deeper going on. And so really a lot of my career since then has been about investigating what that is. And I want to share some of that with you. This image, to me, is a symbol for what I'm talking about when I talk about hip-hop culture. And you'll see it's not someone rapping, right? It's something else going on. Hip-hop has multiple elements, multiple art forms. You got the dance, the DJing, the MCing, the visual art, people call graffiti or aerosol art, and then, of course, knowledge of self. So here, this is about the dance, right? And you see a young man who is inventing a new dance move here. And what the context of this picture is important to understand. The context is we're in the South Bronx in probably the late 1970s here, and this neighborhood is being systematically neglected. This is a result of racism and classism in New York City. So trash isn't being picked up, you have stuff left on the street, you have burned out buildings, you have kids going to schools that are not giving them an adequate education. They're being trained, pushed into vocational tracks and trained on equipment for jobs that no longer exist. There are not jobs available. Jeff Chang, who's a hip-hop scholar, said if blues music came out of forced and oppressive labor conditions, hip-hop came out of no work. So you had a lot of young people on the street trying to figure things out and make do. And you had the city bulldozing through the South Bronx to put a highway to go straight to downtown Manhattan so that people could commute from the suburbs and get into and out of the city, but meanwhile really destroying this neighborhood. And what young people did in the face of all that is summed up perfectly in this line by the rapper Lupe Fiasco. I backflipped on that mattress they slept on me on, right? So if you think about young people who are being slept on by society, they're not being thought about, they're not being cared for, they're being underestimated in terms of what they're capable of. And instead of going to this really negative place with that, they backflipped on that and created this whole new form of music and art that has been the lasting and predominant global popular culture for my entire lifetime, right? For these last 3.5 decades now. So, I think it's important when we think about this concept that we not romanticize this notion of scarcity or struggle, right? Because it's very real for people who have gone through it, and you shouldn't have to go through that in order to be creative, in order to solve harder problems. And at the same time, we, as educators, are facing a lot of hard challenges, right? We're facing a lack of resources. We're facing some really daunting tasks. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from hip-hop culture. I'll share just a couple other things that I think are really important to talk about. One is when we're talking about kind of literally bringing hip-hop culture into the classroom, I think it's really important to acknowledge and talk about race and racism. I am what we call in the hip-hop community a white boy. It's an affectionate term most of the time, but and as such, there's pieces of the culture that I have access to, that I can bring in, that I've been creating for a long time as someone who has written rhymes and DJed and done all this stuff. And there's ways in which it's not my culture, because hip-hop predominantly was derived from black art forms, both in this country and all over the diaspora, and has been created and innovated over the last several decades predominantly by black artists, right? So there's ways in which, as a white teacher, I can bring that in, and there's ways in which it's not my culture to be an expert on, and it can actually be alienating to students if I do it in the wrong way, right? If I say, I'm going to teach you about this culture, that can actually really turn students off and take something that has been sacred or a really important place for them outside of the institutions of education and these other institutions they're dealing in, and kind of claim it into those institutions and try to sort of take it away from them can be a real problem. So I think it's important that as we think about the power of hip-hop culture and all the ways that it can impact our work as teachers and educators and bringing it in literally and having those conversations with our students, we also have to be really careful, especially white teachers, but really teachers of any race. There's a number of assumptions we can make, right? Because no matter what race we are, if we walk into a classroom and we think, oh, because you look a certain way, I think you like this music, and I bring in some Dr. Dre, I might be on the East Coast and my kids are like, what? Like, that has no relevance to my life. Like, that's not what I listen to. Also, he's old. Like, go away. I bring in Jay-Z now thinking I'm so hip. And kids are like, who? My parents listen to that. Seriously. I mean, I have students who are named after Raekwon, students who are named after DJ Premier, right? So we're in this whole other era. So there's a lot of assumptions we can make that, oh, because you say you like hip-hop or you dress a certain way, that you're going to identify with this particular artist or this particular music from this particular region could be totally wrong. Right? Also, if it's not really our culture, to try to come in and all of a sudden be an expert on it and teach our students. So I'm going to tell you hip-hop history. that can really turn them off too. And I've seen that happen. Teachers coming in saying, yo, 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 what's up? And the kids are like, that wasn't how you were yesterday. Like, what are you doing? So I'll get more to this concept of keeping it real, but I think that's really important. Like, who are you really? It's okay to be interested in the culture. It's okay to want to bring that into your work, but how do you do that? And how do you, first of all, not make assumptions about your students that that's what they're into? And second of all, how do you honor, to the extent that they are into it and maybe experts on it, how do you honor that? How do you honor their interests and passions within it? How do you find out who they're actually listening to and why and bring that in, right? Very important. I saw a hand.
For me, it's the evolution of hip-hop moves so quick, like from month to month. How do you balance that within your curriculum?
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons I've refused. That's a great question. So the question was, hip-hop evolves so fast. How do you create a curriculum around something that is moving so rapidly? Like I said in there, a hot beat yesterday was a hot beat yesterday, right? And there's this thing in hip-hop culture, the flip that Lupe was talking about. You always have to flip something. So if I came in and rhymed something a certain way, the next person can't get this, and everyone loved it and goes crazy. The next person does the same thing. They're gonna be like, you just bit that off Sam. Like, that's not fresh. I'm not impressed, right? So like as teachers, how do we balance that? Like, we create this amazing lesson plan and it's around the Fuji song, The Mask, and we're bringing in all this different literature around it and it's incredible. But 2 years later, like, no one wants to hear about the Fujis or The Mask. So, I think those are real challenges. I think one of the pieces for me is, that's why people have pushed me to put out like a curriculum kind of companion to this book. And I don't want to do it because I just think that stuff can get really stale. I think some of it has to do at a certain point with like how much you love it and how much it's your thing as a teacher. I can sell certain stuff. Like if you get me talking about Nas with a group of young people today, like I can get them interested usually because I get so passionate and I start quoting all these songs and bringing it in and connecting it to whatever they're talking about. But a lot of what I do with young people is I really ask them, what are you listening to? And then we look at that and we talk about social issues in it. We talk about the literary stuff that's going on. I mean, I can find examples of alliteration, of metaphor, of all these different things. So often, I really want to know what they're listening to, because the other thing I might find out is not even rap. Some of them are into indie rock. Some of them are into reggae. So like by doing it that way, I don't end up like creating this thing where they're like, what, you thought just because, we're black or because we dress a certain way that this is what we listen to? Like, I'm goth, So I like to let, seriously, so I like to let people bring in what they like. That's a big part of it. And then I think I buy myself the credit that I can bring in what I like a little bit too, right? If we've gone around and you've all gotten to share your thing, now I'm like, okay, boom, this is what I wanted to share with you. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's going to be very tough to keep up with the changing hip-hop culture daily, but I also think that it's very possible because just being aware of your surroundings with the kids, they're always singing. They always have an iPod, an MP3 player, some earplugs in. And so if you just listen, if you just pay attention, and not just that, also the radio. I DJ. It's like the family business. So right. I'm always listening to what's new and what's out. And I can't keep up with artists as much as I can keep up with the song. Like I know what I heard. I don't know who that was singing it, but this is what song is this? And I'll bring that to a student. They say, oh, that's so-and-so. That's A$AP Rocky. That's the, and you're like, oh, okay. And so I'm taking mental notes because I like the song. I didn't know who sang it, but you learn to keep up through the kids. And they always bring stuff. And if you hear them, or a lot of them, like the Nene. When the Nene first came out, I was like, who? What? It's like, no, go to YouTube, look up this, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, y'all, this doesn't have any cussing words in it, because I'm playing it over in class, and I don't know, so I'm asking, and they're like, no, there's no cussing in it, and as it's playing, they said, I don't think, I really hope not. So the administrator comes in, it's like the last 5 minutes of class, and I had gone through other songs, and they said, you gotta play the Nene, and all he comes in on is, and so you keep it fresh, and they understand, and they got him to do the Nene. Needless to say, our principal was doing a Nene in the classroom. So it just, if you pay attention to what they like, they'll bring you in, and they'll tell you, you can't play that one in class, don't play that one. Right. Just certain things, and you can keep up with what's going on through the kids. Because I can't do it by myself, but they help.
Yep. No, I love that. I have very similar experiences and love asking people what they're listening to. And you know what? Some of it might not be the most positive or have all clean words, but it's what they're listening to all the time. So I really want to bring it in and have us have some critical conversation about it, right? What are the messages in this song about women? What are the messages in this song about, drugs and alcohol use? Let's actually talk about it. Because if we say, oh, you can only play the 2 songs that you like with no curses, we're missing a lot of what they're listening to. I see a hand back here.
Well, relates directly to what you guys are discussing and how administrators react. I'm so happy to hear that yours chose to do the nay-nay in response, but I know that I've seen different reactions, particularly as it relates to the word usage. And especially if you're printing and handing out a paper, and with NTAC maybe that's nice, we can have it on the computer and maybe no one sees it. But the point is, I've seen that go bad in a classroom, and I'm wondering, what did you do, or what have you done, or what has anyone done to protect themselves? Or
right. Well, when I was, other people may have ideas here. When I was teaching in the prison, I spent a lot of time going through lyric sheet. It was the same. You really hit on one of the issues. I could pretty much play whatever I wanted. No one cared. It was what I handed out that kids took back to their unit that somebody might see and be like, what? Why? What are these words? So when I printed out the lyrics, I would go through with a fine-tooth comb, and I would just take out anything that it wasn't just curse words in there. It was anything too violent. I had to take out a lot, but I didn't want them to get in trouble, and I didn't want to get in trouble. So I did that. I don't like to do it, but I did. And when we would listen along, they would see what was missing, and sometimes we would talk about that. But yeah, I think, it depends on your setting and knowing your setting and being careful about it. The other thing I will say about that is sometimes we would take, if there's a song that was really popular that didn't have the most positive language or message, the remix can be a great activity. Let's rewrite it. Let's rewrite it about opera. Let's rewrite it about this social issue that's going on. There's a lot of great examples, like Dead Prez have a couple albums called Turn Off the Radio, where they take popular songs from the radio and they change the words. They use like a similar sounding phrase, but they flip it to have a different meaning. And you can find a ton of those. Jasiri X is another artist who's done that and taken a lot of pop songs and made them into political songs about current events. So sometimes I'll share a few examples of that, and we'll have the opportunity to say, you love this song right now? Let's use it and flip it and give it a different meaning. We're going to take these 2, and then we're going to move on to some other stuff.
Well, I created a unit on figurative language and used a bunch of songs. I hooked them using Music Soul Child's Love, because personification, so I showed them the video first. And then had them listen to the lyrics, and then I did the same thing with, when you're talking about lyrics, Brown Sugar by D'Angelo.
Yep.
And you see the lyrics and you think it's about a woman. And then I tell them, no, it's about smoking weed. And, and
That
then
gets
they
their
sort of,
attention.
there's, the same thing with Rick James, Mary Jane. So, and then they're always surprised, but then we get into these conversations about how we can use words, different words to say, to talk about something undercover, or, you say one thing, then you mean another. So, all these metaphors and personification, and then, followed up with Rihanna's, Take a Bow, and, use all these songs. Then fairly recent Elle Varner's Refill, and then the kids really get into that, and they start to understand. But then I follow up with, actual, English literature, poetry, excuse me. And then I have a book, the hip hop poetry, which pairs
Yeah, I know the book.
hip hop
Yep.
songs with actual, poems. And when you talk about making it relevant, it focuses on a certain literary device, imagery or metaphors. You could just simply replace the song that they provide in the book with something fairly new, fairly recent, but still give the English, the poem that, the English poem that
Right.
they provide also.
Cool. Yeah, that book is called Hip Hop Poetry in the Classics by Michael Sorelli and Lawrence Allen Sidemer, I think. Yeah. Okay, last one, and then we're
I was
moving
just
on.
gonna make a comment about the administrators and the things like that you print. I've also had to black out or white out some lyrics, and generally, even when I have it on the smart board, I highlight it and turn it white so you don't see those words. But you realize, some of them you still see lines are green or the squiggly red lines from word. And even still, whether you put it there or not. If it's modern, if it's popular, the kids already know what the song says, so it doesn't matter if you black it out. And the kids always say, we've heard it before, and I'm kind of torn as an educator and as a DJ to decide whether or not it is okay for us to I don't want to put it on the board to say this is okay, because generally it's not.
Right.
To a certain extent. It's not okay for me to say it's okay. Don't want you to sing it out loud. That's not what I want them, the impression I want them to have. But at the same time, if we're going to discuss it, it's kind of hard to discuss it and say, well, let's not say this part. Let's not go this part. Because then they say, well, let's just not even talk about this song or whatever it is that we're wanting to do. So, and I haven't been like caught by an administrator showing something like that, but at the same time, it's always a fear that as you're discussing this with this language, somebody's going to walk in and say, like,
Right.
stop right in the middle of your lesson. Even though if they stood around long enough, they go, oh, that
they
was
would
great.
understand why you were doing it.
Right, and I think that we have to have more sessions like this for administrators so they can jump on board to understand that there's a lot more to hip hop culture than just the cuss words.
Right,
Because they will take you somewhere else later. And I mean, I don't particularly like as much as some rappers give, but you can pick and choose.
Right.
You know, and some of the better ones are still gonna have some language. And you can discuss that as well as a different issue.
Well, that's why one of the reasons that I wrote my book was for the administrators, for the teachers who are already doing this work, to have something to give to that administrator to say, this is what this is about. This is a part of something bigger. This is part of something with a lot of value. I'm not just going off the map here doing this. Like there's something here, and there's a number of books, and now you have a lot of Columbia University, Harvard, Cornell. Everyone's doing hip hop education related stuff, and it's being validated in a lot of ways by these more traditional institutions. Whether that's always a good thing or not is a whole other conversation. But there is a lot of that validation to point to when people have questions. The last thing I'll say just about the language issue, because it sounds like that was coming up a lot, is also just the importance of teaching young people, whether they're very young or up through high school, about code switching. Right, and what language is appropriate in different places, and how we can use a different language in different places. And it's not that one is better than the other, but it is that in a job interview, one is going to probably work for you, and one's going to be less effective. On the street, it might be the opposite, right? So, I like to talk about, actually, my friend Chris Emden, who's an awesome scholar. He has a TED Talk that's been blowing up lately. He does science education in hip hop. And I heard we were at an institute in Wisconsin speaking, and he talked about having his students translate 3 languages. He has them use science language, kind of like proper standard English, I forget exactly what he called it, and then like street English. And he'll have them translate the same thing about a scientific phenomenon they're witnessing, to say it in all 3 ways, to make sure that they can function in all these different spaces effectively, which I thought was really cool. And he'll ask them, like, they'll say, oh, that was osmosis, and he'll be like, okay, now translate that for me into just like standard English, and they'll do that, and they'll say, okay, now explain it in street English, and they'll do that. So they're constantly like practicing, going back and forth. So I think that code switching thing is a great exercise. I'm going to share just 3. There's a lot we can say about hip hop and education. We can talk about the battle and how that can play out in education space, freestyle, of course. But I'm going to share 3 concepts today with you all. The first is this. So I think this is an important lesson for us as educators. A lot has been done, right? Project-based learning been invented. There's all different organizations who talk about it, schools all over the world who do it. How can we take our piece of that and use it in the way that's effective for us? Same with all sorts of traditional practices, right? So my question for you is, what can you sample and how can you flip it? Any thoughts right off the rip just about things you have sampled in your education practice?
With figurative language, I know that was brought up a couple of times. One of the lessons that I did with starting use of figurative language was that I had a couple of lyrics I had a quote from a book, and I think I also had something pretty simple, like something that I created. And it was, the top lyric was from Triumph from Wu-Tang Clan. The second one was from, I think it was Invisible Man. And it was, and I forgot the third one. But the first one I did, I just said them both in kind of the East Coast style of doing the flow, and would just let them know that, this is hip hop right here. This is Invisible Man. This was something written way before hip hop was a thought, more towards the jazz era. So you see how they can be kind of similar and just kind of like flip that idea, because they both thought that it was lyrics from the same song.
Right.
So just kind of bringing.
Wow, really? So they thought the stuff from Invisible Man was straight out of Triumph?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
but
That's cool.
just to bring it back to them, and just to not only see the idea of the use of language, but to see how they could see that the flow of the words, because Invisible Man is not really poetry, it's complete prose, but to see how that prose fits was something that they really enjoyed, and especially the use of a lot of these words, with Triumph, with the first part of Triumph, using the bomb atomically, Socrates' philosophies and hypotheses. They were like, wow, what is that? And then those words that they never heard before, but seeing it from Invisible Man was a little bit different. They were just like, wow, well, okay, so he started out being really smart and then he brought it backwards, right? And I was like, no, this is from something way back in the day. But these two are very similar because it's really promoting the same thing. So that's how I tried to flip a sample from those two.
Yeah, so you sampled from these two different artists of sorts and then added your own flavor to it. Nice. Any other samples of teaching practices? Tex, we got one more back here.
Just I can't think of the artist right now, but it was speaking to the idea that the industry kind of took over hip hop and decided to market gangster rap. I can't think of the artist right now, but it was an entire song about that. And just when you brought up negative experiences, it maybe was a negative experience, because I was trying to kind of sell to them, hey, look, like, this music you listen to has been manufactured to brainwash you, to think things, to act ways, and it didn't hit home very well. So
What was their response?
they just, well, the depth of the lyrics were hard for them to get, and I think we rushed it a little. So I think that it wasn't connecting for them at all.
It would have been interesting. Did you let them bring in stuff?
No,
It would
because
have
I
been
was
interesting.
very fearful of the environment in which I was in. So
Right,
I'm
it would have
not
been
gonna-
interesting though if you had done that first. I'm curious whether
Absolutely.
it would have been embraced or there would have been a different level of patience and like interest in understanding the song you brought in. But I don't. It's hard to.
No,
it's hard
when
to
you
know.
mentioned that, I immediately was like, yeah, that was a mistake there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I think that can make a huge difference. What would it look like to do project-based learning as teachers? And so that's what I've been engaged in over the last several months. And on the one hand, even just doing projects with our students is more engaging for us, right? When you think about comparing handing out a worksheet with multiple choice questions to prepare students for the same standardized test over and over versus the kinds of projects that we're talking about, designing a video game to send a message about civilization and raise money at the same time, right? Like that's much more engaging for me as a teacher. Being Dario or Dan, the teachers you saw in the High School for Recording Arts video, working with the students doing the Breathe video for United Way, is a much more enriching and sustaining experience for me as a teacher than just doing the same multiple choice lesson plan stuff over and over again. So there's that, but then there's this other side to it about what it might mean for teachers to engage in doing projects ourselves. So what I want to do with the rest of our time, I wanted to share this quote. We live in a country where those who know the most about education have the least say, and those who know the least have the most say, right? And that really resonated for me when I saw that, and it connects to this work that I've been doing that I'm going to try to engage you all in. So basically, over the last several months, I've been working through my organization, the Business Innovation Factory, on a project that is engaging teachers in project-based learning through design thinking. It's a 6-week project that we did with teachers in Philadelphia, in Chicago, and in Rhode Island. And I'm going to boil it down to the next 60 minutes with you all. So we're going to do like basically a week in 10 minutes, kind of. That's our time ratio. But I thought it would be fun to do. I'm going to skip ahead a little here because I'm very excited to say that we have real-world examples in the house. From Catherine Smith Middle School, or elementary school, sorry. So I'm going to invite Erin, the principal of Catherine Smith, up to share just a little background on the school. Then I'm going to give you a little overview of our teacher project-based learning curriculum, and then we're going to hear from some of the folks at the school about real problems that they're tackling, and we're going to solve those problems for them in the next hour. Erin.
Very cool. I'm Aaron Drenger. I'm the principal of NTAC School. It's an elementary school in San Jose, California. We're a public neighborhood school. All you have to do is live in a neighborhood and you get PBL. You're school-wide, right? So there's nothing, no charter, there's no small school model. We're just the whole thing. We're in an urban setting, high poverty. We're using actually our NTAC model as a redesign of our school to change the context, to give real meaningful work to our students. So we're in our second year. We just finished our second year, and I don't know where you guys are in terms of your number of years you've been involved in it, but we took on way too much our second year. Our first year had this euphoria, had this energy. We rolled through it. Our second year, we tried to solve every single problem that came in front of us, and it became overwhelming. It became to a point where we almost didn't even know what we stood for. We started to lose a little bit of our identity in trying to solve all these problems. So an idea that came at the end was we have to be more strategic around problem solving. And we do try to use PBL. We try to have driving questions in our meetings, try to make sure that we're always in a constructivist approach, that teachers involved in inquiry in our faculty meetings and things, but it's still not, there's still not enough time to solve all the problems. So we've created a strategic structure where we've taken smaller problems that we want to tackle and made smaller teams to work on those problems, and those teams will kind of advise and come back and they'll solve those problems. And it was, in talking with Sam, and hearing about, and I actually had a few teachers that heard about the TD for Ed, which is this idea of using this design thinking model in it. So there's some structure, some protocol to even problem solving. So to me it seems like a perfect little fit in there. With we know we want to solve these problems. We know I know the experts are in the room. I know the answers are in the room. We keep saying that over and over again. It's true. It's just the space and the time and the structure to get it out. Right? I mean, every time we sit down to talk, it's after a long day of work. And so it takes a lot to get the best ideas out. But it is possible. It just takes intentional work. So are you going to talk about 3 problems then?
I'm going to show a little bit, and then we'll get to the problems. But thank you. So that gives a little background on the school and why they're interested in this. This platform that we've developed it's an online curriculum. It's multimedia. I'll give you a little taste of that. It was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so we're able to share it for free, which is cool. And it also has a collaborative side to it. So once you create a login, and I'll give you the website and everything so you can do that if you're interested, you can actually see the projects that teachers all over the country are doing and get ideas and see their solutions as well. So that's what we've been building. Just to give you a quick overview of it, the curriculum functions in 6 stages, and we're going to focus on 2 of them today because the teachers from the school have already done the work, or the whole staff there has done the work of defining a problem that we want to tackle. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what Explore and Reflect look like, but we're going to spend most of our time today dwelling in the Imagine and Play, where we get to brainstorm and come up with some solutions for them, and the best solutions are going to win copies of the book. So it's not a competition, but there's only 3. This is the idea behind Define is to come up with what your design challenge is, and this is kind of the rough format that we suggest. It's how might we redesign or reimagine the blank experience for this group of people, whether it's students, teachers, students just in my class, students in the whole school, the entire community, parents. It could, plug in the stakeholders there in order to, and this is what we're trying to change, right? So I'm going to show you this video that just gives you a little background on that and gives you a flavor for the curriculum.
Rather than asking, why can't we? Design thinking reframes that question to, how might we? Optimism allows us to see a problem as an opportunity for change and opens us up to new possibilities. It's an important mindset for defining a design challenge. And there are 5 characteristics of picking a great one. It should be exciting and impactful and meaningful for you. It should be measurable, so you have a clear vision of what success looks like. It should be focused on the people at the center of the issue, so you can get to the heart of the problem. It should be open-ended to allow for a variety of potential solutions to emerge. And it should be achievable, so you can tackle it with the resources and time you have available. Defining clear design at the beginning of the process will focus your energy and efforts throughout the rest of your work. Now let's take a look at a concrete example of how we define a design challenge.
Meet Maria, Brenda, and Mike, a group of teachers at Summit High School. They noticed that staff felt overwhelmed as many new initiatives were introduced one after another. Typically, teachers were brought into a room to listen to an expert talk, with the expectation that they would bring these new practices into their classroom. Their school was about to go through another major transition, a technology initiative where students would receive their own computers. Many teachers felt unprepared to integrate this into their current practice, but Maria, Brenda, and Mike wanted to use this opportunity to transform the culture of change. They defined an opportunity. How might we help teachers embrace change to improve their practice? With this design challenge in hand, they set out to explore.
All right, so I'm going to invite our friends from Catherine Smith to come up and share the design challenges that we're going to be looking at today.
My name is Rachel Trowbridge. I taught first grade last year, and I'm going to loop my kids with me to second next year. And we initially, when we started our first year at Catherine Smith, the majority of the teachers were new to the school, and so we really had to establish ourselves with the students and make them kind of connect with us, and that was really difficult. Initially, there were a lot of discipline issues stemming from the environment, stemming from past hurts from previous teachers, and it was a long time coming. It took a long time to kind of get that bond with the kids, and we got that, and we got it under control, we thought. And then this year, we see the same kids visiting the office. It's about 2% of our kids. It's kind of a repeat thing, and it's largely our upper grade Hispanic males. So what we're trying to figure out is how we can target that group of students, and we need to kind of look at ourselves and are we treating them differently? Do we need to handle them differently? Kind of looking outside of the box in how we deal with those boys and how we keep them out of the office. We don't want to use traditional methods. We don't want to suspend them. We want them in the classroom. And we really feel like the best discipline is a really good curriculum, so we're trying to figure out how to get them engaged and want to stay in the classroom. So that's kind of where we are with the whole discipline thing. And we realize too that there may be some differences between the primary and the upper grade as far as discipline systems in place, but we really don't want to use traditional methods. It doesn't really work for our kids. They don't respond well to that.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. So that's our first design challenge. How might we create a discipline system that supports students and creates self-directed, empathetic learners?
Hi, I'm Doris Melman. So 2 years ago, we started project-based learning and Common Core. We started both of them at the same time. The Common Core being what we taught, and PBL is how we taught it. Right away, we figured out how are we going to show progress? How are we going to report this? So we have 3 problems around report cards. The first being we want to report on the standards that we teach, not the subject. So the particular part of the math that we taught, not just math in general. That's our first problem. The second one is how can we report on what kids do inside of a project, their communication, their collaboration, how they're thinking through a project. How do we report on that to parents? How can we accurately give them a picture of how they're doing with that, the 21st century skills? The third thing, and really very important to us, is we want our parents to really understand whatever it is that we're sending home. We can't go home with the report card unless we do like a miracle somehow. We're not going to be there when they open up that envelope and look at that report card. So how can we make it relevant to them? How can we make it, and also part of that being, how can we make it so we can really show them who their child really is at school? What are they really doing? What are all of the components of them? Not just the academic pieces, but who they really are as people.
Awesome. So our second challenge is it fair to say redesigning the report card?
Oh yeah.
And last but not least.
So we, yes. Hi, my name is Javier Gonzalez, and I am a kindergarten teacher at Catherine Smith. One of the big challenges we have in our school is with our substitutes. I mean, I think we use it more than our other traditional schools because we have more time to collaborate. And the first 3 months of our first year, we spent a lot of the time building culture, making sure that our kids knew that we loved them and they could trust us. So that the first 3 months were challenging, but we were able to create a culture within our school and the classroom where they know we love them. But when a substitute comes in, they come in mind, like, we're going to Catherine Smith, those are tough kids. So they already come in with like a judgment, again, like judging without knowing them. So they come in with an authoritative version, like, okay, I'm in charge. And then the kids, again, react to it. And I mean, we're trying to develop that culture of code switching. I mean, they come from environments where they have to be tough. And we know that, we acknowledge it. But we have to also have them understand that there's a time and place. And I think that's a big struggle for us. I mean, we want to make sure that when a substitute comes in, we can change this up. We tried that the first year. After our first year, we had a lot of subs who basically walked out of the classroom. They're like, this is too much for me, I'm walking out. And again, we don't want our kids to have, okay, well, fine, walk out and I'm gonna act up again when there's another sub. We want them to make sure that we can empower the students on how to react when there's a person come here like, I'm in charge, you're gonna do what I tell you to do. So that's, I think, we want to make sure that the kids are the ones that kind of build that empathy for that adult who comes in and not knowing what they're getting themselves into. So when they come in, we want to make sure that we have our kids who are basically have empathy on the subs and kind of be the helpers guiding them. And if we have our projects going on, making sure that those projects can continue ongoing without us having to write a traditional sub-plan, which we wanted to stay away from that and make sure that we want to continue our projects. So we want to make sure that we have our kids ready to basically guide us up through our day. This is what we do, okay. So that's what we want to do with our kids.
Great, thank you. So substitutes, report cards, and discipline. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that maybe some of you have experienced some of these same challenges or questions. Yeah? I thought that they were great ones for us to tackle together. I know we're not gonna solve all of them entirely today, but I thought that we could have some generative conversation, do some brainstorming, and give these guys some good stuff to go back to their school with and really test out some of these design thinking principles. So there's a whole 2 steps in this process, explore and reflect, that are really about actually doing some research. And I don't mean necessarily book research, although there can be some of that, but it's about actually getting out there and trying to understand what the actual challenge is. So if we're talking about something for students, what are they experiencing? If we're talking about substitute teachers, we would want to go and observe their experience. We would want to interview them one-on-one after teaching at our school to understand, like, how did that feel? What was your process beforehand? What were the moments that felt really good? What were the moments that didn't feel as good? To start to really get a sense of what they're experiencing. Same with the students. Why, okay, I see that you behaved really differently with this substitute. I want to understand why. What happened there, right? So there's this whole area of research, which obviously we can't do today because we're trapped in a hotel and we don't have the time. But in this design process where we would get out and do some field research. So here's a list of some examples. I just touched on some of them. Right, we're talking about individual interviews. You could do group interviews. You could talk to all the students at once, for instance. You could bring in a group of parents and talk to them about their experience reading report cards. What does it bring up for them? What always confuses them? What parts do they really like and scan right down to look for, right? Observation, watching it in action, like shadowing. Participant self-documentation, you can ask them. There's even apps that have been created for this that will ping somebody during the day and ask them a question that you can program. So you could do that with a substitute, with a student, with a teacher, with a parent, to get them to document and give you information back. It could be journaling. It could be that you ask them to take a picture of something, depending on what you're looking for. And then there's also expert interviews, right? You could go out there and talk to, if you know that there's a school that's already doing it in a really interesting way. Let's say with the report card question, you really like the portfolio system at High Tech High. You could reach out to them and ask them about it. And you can jump outside education and ask people, how do you do this in another setting, right? So all of these things are possible. And then what becomes really important is what happens after that, the reflection process. So we go out and ask all these questions, do observations, all this type of stuff, but then what do we do with that information? Hugely important that we debrief that. So if we're doing this as teams, if I'm working with a few other teachers at the school around looking at discipline system, rethinking the report card, the substitute issue, coming back and sharing, this is what we learned when we went out and did these observations. This is what we learned by talking with this expert. This is what the students shared with us when we asked them for their participant feedback. Identifying the patterns in that information. How do these pieces connect? How does what students in one class said connect with students in the other class? How does what the students said connect with what their parents said? Or in the substitute issue, how does what the students said connect with what the substitute was saying? Were they identifying the same moment where something went awry? Did they have very different interpretations of what happened in that moment? Those kind of questions. But we're looking to start to identify patterns. From those patterns, we can develop insights, right? We can start to see, okay, if this is a pattern, why is this happening? What do we think this means? And from those insights, we can start to generate the design principles. Okay, if the issue is this certain kind of miscommunication, we know that our solution, one way or another, has to speak to that. If the issue is that there's a lot of good information in the report card, but the parents are saying they don't know how to read it, they don't know how to navigate through it, we don't know what our solution is, but we know that it has to have some guiding and provide some context around the information we're giving, right? So we generate design principles out of all that. We're going to fast forward through those two stages today because we don't have enough time, and they would require us going out into the field and doing some things that we can't do. But they are really important pieces as we think about doing this design thinking work. We're going to jump to what I believe are the funnest parts, that's the good news for everyone here, which are imagine and play. And really, this is the brainstorming of ideas, and we have experts in the challenge, right? So we can do a little research by asking our experts at each table to give us more information about what's not working, why this challenge has arisen, although I think they already did a pretty great job of summing that up. But if we do want to clarify anything, and we're going to be able to jump into trying to help solve the problem by brainstorming and then even getting to the stage of prototyping some ideas for some solutions. All right, can I get a volunteer to go first? Wow, that hand went up. Okay. We got our team in the back here. So you have just a minute to just share your new invention, service offering, idea that's going to change the world.
Okay, so I had water and she had cell phone, and we decided to come up with the HiPhone, which is a hydroelectric powered cell phone. So we would have something like this. that there would be a mechanism in it that moves to power the water, or to move the water to power the phone.
And you won't have to worry about your battery drowning all the time.
Right. You just
Wait a second. So I could go in like a public restroom, turn the faucet on,
and bam,
and charge my phone? How much and where do I get it? That's brilliant. Nice. All right, let's just go around that table for sake of...
We have the word cat and the word unicorn. So what else can you do but to create a series of happy videos on YouTube? So it's a production company to make people happy. Our tagline?
You find your happiness over the rainbow.
Yeah. Cats and unicorns.
You already have 20 million views, so just off that. That's great. Nice.
We had iPad and student, and we thought that it would be really interesting to see what each student's iPad looked like, what apps they would have on there, and what things they would follow, and what social media they would do. So we called it MyPad.
Cool. Wait. So what does it do? It tracks like.
It would track the individual student and what they have on theirs, like what they are interested in.
And give us data.
Yeah, give us data.
Wow. That's powerful. Does that exist? Anybody?
I don't know.
It seems like that's the only matter of time until that happens.
She said the names out there somewhere, but we'll see.
All right. Last group from this table.
We had dog and table, and we decided to create doggy etiquette, where we would put doggy dishes in holes in the table to keep them in place, and they could go up to the table too. And discuss the events of their day.
That's great. They
Learn to eat.
they can learn code switching from barking to talking.
Dog in the streets or
Right.
German dog?
Right. I love it. That's great. Let's come to this table over here. What do we have?
We came up with a restaurant concept, so it'd be Sparrow, California, playing off Sparrow being small, quick, fast, and California being big and kind of chill.
So yes, with the idea is that the menu, with California being one of the bigger states, it would be a vast menu, but the difference is that with the Sparrow being fast, you would get fast, accurate service. We would hope that you would never really have to return anything, any of the food. And the tagline, since they had taglines, I just created a tagline. Our tagline would be, we make it easy to take it easy.
Nice. You got that? We make it easy to take it easy. Beautiful. You guys handled that one. Nice.
Yeah.
What do we have here?
We picked chocolate and zebra, so we now have a new Starbucks drink for kids that's called the Chocolate Zebra, and it's got light chocolate and dark chocolate in it, and it's in a little zebra cup.
It's a little cocoa drink.
That's great. I don't know if you should give that to Starbucks, though. You might want to hang on. You live so close. You could start your own little
exactly.
spot.
We could.
Maybe that could be, or at least sell it to these guys. They could be on the menu at Sparrow, California. All right, let's come over to this table and hear these brilliant ideas.
All right, so our 2 words were computer and balcony, and in that we came up with open up your own balcony, and thinking that it could kind of be a personalized balcony that you could keep with you in your bag wherever you keep your computer, something that had Wi-Fi, a hotspot, whatever helps you get in your mode to think and be productive, and wherever you are on the road, you could open up your balcony to be productive.
Nice.
So
I
that's
like
what
that
we
a
got.
lot. It's a great name.
We had dog and tire.
Dog and tire, if anybody missed it.
So,
Will you turn in, like, yeah.
So we decided that we would have bicycle tire covers with pictures of your dog, because people have like these stickers on their cars to represent their like dog breeds and things like that. So we didn't get it as far as to come up with a tagline, but there will be tire covers to represent your dog breeds.
One thing I've learned from being in a relationship with someone who is very obsessed with their dog is there is no end to what people will spend to put images of their dog or a dog that looks like their dog on items that they own. So I think that has a lot of financial potential right there. Like, we won't spend money on ourselves, but we will get anything that has to do with the dog. That's brilliant.
So our 2 words were girlfriend and engagement. And
little mind meld going on over there.
So during our discussion, we talked about, a gentleman who wanted to be engaged, but maybe the girlfriend wasn't ready. And just if they were to have this piece of jewelry, it would ensure. So our tagline.
So she won't say no, empowering. That's the name of our
Power ring. So wait, how does it work? How does it?
It's just 100% guarantee.
Yes,
It just
100%.
Wow. What's the price point on those?
That's sure thing.
500,000.
It's a great name. You guys got to trademark that. All right, last but not least.
We had car in New York City, which is pretty fitting. So we kind of tossed around a couple ideas, but settled on rent-a-ride. So you would, and New Yorkers don't necessarily need cars all the time, but when you do need a car, I'm sure this idea already exists, you would just rent a car for however long you would need it.
Nice. So like on the spot.
On the spot. It could be like Uber, like they deliver it to your apartment or whatever, and then.
I like that. The concierge, like they just pull up and hop out, and then they just have to sit there and wait while you.
I don't know. That I can't.
We got to work that little kink out, but that has a lot of potential.
They have that in San Francisco, actually. There's stations you just go.
Yeah.
Nice. So you can see that in about, I gave you a little over 2 minutes, and you had just completely random words, and really came up with some awesome ideas. I think those are all $1 million ideas. it's powerful when we start brainstorming together and collaborating on this stuff. So now we're going to turn those same skills toward these real school-based challenges that we've been hearing about. And we're going to take about 5 minutes just by ourselves. I put Post-its on every table. Just grab a few Post-its and just start jotting down the ideas that you have to help with your problem. And if you need to just get a quick refresher from your expert at your table, from Catherine Smith Elementary, feel free to ask them to just refresh you on the challenge. But don't start discussing your ideas yet. This is not yet time to vet the ideas. This is just writing down everything you can think of for how to tackle this design challenge. Starting now.
Do you guys have any clarifying questions?
Okay, so my question is.
So I know you probably haven't completed your prototype, but hopefully you've been able to jot down some ideas, start to sketch it out a little bit, gotten the flavor for this piece of the process. I'm going to ask for volunteers, one from each group, to share what you generated. And I'll take the first hand that goes up at each group. We got one, we got two. This group, do we have a volunteer? Our discipline group?
Oh, sure.
All right. We got our 3 volunteers. I'm going to ask you to actually come up, each person, and present out to everyone here. Just remind us what the challenge was and tell us about the solution that you generated. Let's do this group first.
Okay, so ours was about, I'm Stephanie. Ours was about how to assess differently and give feedback to families who, for the most part, they were saying don't necessarily understand the current form of feedback for students. So we talked a lot about creating a visual that went with the way that students were assessed and looking at icons. And so the school already has icons for specific grading category or learning outcomes. So we were using those. And in this one, we talked about, Sam came over and was saying, well, it would be great if there's students' pictures on whatever it is. So whether this is, I was trying to create something that could be online and then could also be a printout version so that it would have dual accessibility. So then it would have the student's photo, and then there would be the grading categories with whether it be a hover over, but some sort of explanation of each of the icons. And then there would be, we talked about having, or one of the ideas that I had brought up was that students pick what they think best represents specific categories. So their 3 best projects throughout the year, and that they choose what goes into this culminating piece, so that the outcomes really is more like a portfolio of their best work. And then they explain, and they have to explain maybe at an exhibition why they chose it and what specific categories it fulfilled. And they have to get all 6 in there somehow, but so they pick ones that would somehow show all of those. And then they personally assess themselves and explain in what ways did they grow in that particular outcome from that project. And then that goes down. And so I had this little, I don't know, maybe you'd create an icon that went for, this was student generated personal feedback, and then maybe you'd have, like, you'd switch throughout and a teacher might put notations there, or even write notes back to that student in this. So maybe a student says, I grew the most when I collaborated with my partner about this, and then maybe the teacher's feedback really is, yes, I saw that when you explained this, this, and this, it really made sense, and I saw your growth in this way after you collaborated with Johnny on this project. And so it really becomes more of like a dialogue within this document. And then and so maybe they pick 3 or 4, however many the school decided, and then maybe there would be a piece at the bottom where the student decides, what is my biggest area of growth? Where do I want to see myself go next year? What grading category is a place where I would like help either from teachers, other students? Where do I want to build, and where do I see myself going with some future goals that they then put down at the bottom, and then teachers can put notations. And then we also talked about maybe giving recording that feedback so that it's auditory, and then there was some pieces generated at the table about translating it for people who English is not their first language.
Beautiful, thank you. How did she do?
Awesome.
Excellent. I mean, that's what matters, is it useful to the folks who are really working on this issue. Thank you. Would you mind coming up and sharing your solution?
Our
one was substitutes, and it's probably like 13 good ideas between 7 people. But this is my idea of it. The problem with substitutes are external and not invested into the school community. So my idea is to control internal outward. I don't think that you really can control the substitutes outwardly. I think that the pool is too big to decide who's coming and who's not coming. So my idea is to create a blind modeling service within the school. So what that would look like would be developing a system to develop control systematic behavior control sets, meaning you would take parents and volunteers from outside the school, bring them within the school in a controlled set where you could use control live feed or Apple, any type of laptop that would give you a feed outside. You could leave that parent or volunteer in and come back after the fact and give adequate feedback to the students as to how they behaved, why they behaved, what was wrong, what was good. Couple that with a positive behavior, such as something that you can track through Kickboard, institute some positive interventions for kids that did do well, so it's not strictly punitive. And then develop outward with feedback from teachers, admin, too, when you do get substitutes in, to create a leeway between the two programs. That would give you a control pool, about 10 to 20 subs that you could use within your own school system, and hopefully that would alleviate your issue.
Awesome, thank you. Fabiola, how do you do? Excellent, that's what matters. Okay, and last but not least, our discipline group.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself too.
My name is Christy Dumovich, and we really talked about kind of a proactive approach to discipline. So one of Lavania's ideas was really good. She talked about a mentoring program with the community and having an ongoing mentoring program where we have role models from the community come in and meet with these students on a weekly basis. So we looked at kind of the stakeholders being community mentors, teachers, counselors, and then also including a lot of personal choice for kids, maybe doing some conflict resolution, and then the students eventually running these groups, or maybe having student leadership and also more rewards for those students. I thought this was kind of interesting, thinking about how to do outreach with the community. So you have, your schoolhouse and your community resources, and then you create these kind of bonding groups of mentors, counselors, and then looking at that as an ongoing process so that you have, lists of people that you can contact within the community and keeping that going in the future. And then we also talked about how the kids would hear about it, so maybe having kind of like incentives like free lunch programs or support groups that the kids would know about beforehand. We also talked about, I did this little thing about doing facilitating and conflict resolution, training kids how to do that so that when fights break out, they can solve those problems with using student facilitators.
Awesome, thank you. How'd you do, Rachel? We just really did it. This was real teacher, project-based professional development together, addressing real challenges in our schools. I want to quickly show you what this looks like in the online version. I showed you that first video. For each phase, there's a video that combines the live action with the whiteboard, and then there's a series of activities. Here's the design challenge one from the beginning. And you actually go through and you can input each piece so that at the end it creates this storytelling public presentation. So here's the page with all the teams that were in our pilot. And as you can see, it shows a picture of the team, the challenge that they addressed. And when you click on one of these, it takes you in and you can actually see the solution they came up with and the different steps that they went through. This is open. This is live right now. On my last slide that I'll put up is the website. It's just tdfored.com. You have to sign up for a login. It's free. But you're welcome to use it. You're welcome to share it with folks. You're welcome to tweet it. Try it with your colleagues. Denise was just asking me about, is it possible to get an entire school on as a team? It is. I mean, we envisioned it for teams of 3 or 4 people, but you could have a whole team, a whole school-wide team, or your school could break up. Like Catherine Smith could have 4 or 5 teachers working on the report card, 4 or 5 teachers working on discipline, 4 or 5 working on substitutes, right? So there's a lot of possibilities with this. To close out, I wanted to share, I said at the beginning I was going to share 3 lessons from hip hop for us as educators, and I've only done 2. Who remembers what they were? What was the first one?
Remember sample?
Sample. We got it. What was the second one?
Keep it real.
Keep it real. Flip was another one. I snuck that one in. I didn't call it that. And the last one that I want to share with you is a word I made up, and it's swagitate. And it's a mixture between swagger and agitate. And I'm going to give you an example from hip-hop culture. This is what was happening with the music industry in the last decade. You can see this is recorded music sales tanking, right? In 2008, an artist that some of you may have heard of or recognize, who's that? Lil Wayne. Did something that a lot of people thought was very stupid. And I'm not talking about smoking, although that could also be viewed that way. But he decided that in the midst of record sales plummeting, on the front end of releasing his album, The Carter 3, he was going to put out not 1, not 2, not 3, but 6 free mixtapes right before he released an album. You can imagine that the record executives were not thrilled with this idea, right? Thinking, who's going to buy your album if you've just put out 6 album-length pieces of material for free? Right? It's a legit question. But he had the swagger and the audacity to say, I don't care what you think about it. This is what I'm doing. He just started putting them online and just letting them go. And what ended up happening is he was prototyping. In a sense, he was doing what we just did. He was making songs and seeing what the audience reaction was to them on the mixtapes. He was seeing which songs blew up, which songs got a lot of plays online. And from that, he was learning what his audience wanted and needed to hear. He was also getting them invested in him. They were listening to him. His voice was always around. They were caring about him. So when the Carter 3 dropped, it sold over 1 million copies in the first week. It went triple platinum. It was the best-selling album in any genre of music that year. He won the Grammy for Best Rap Album, and he was like on everyone's list of top 10 albums of the year, right? But that took a real swagger and audacity, right? He had to push the system. He had to challenge the executives, the people who crunch all the numbers and think they know what you should do, who tell you, no, you shouldn't give it away, right? So I'm encouraging us as educators to think in a similar way, right? Some of our ideas are controversial, how we might handle discipline or how we might address this substitute thing. But part of our job is to agitate, and of course to do that with swag. And so I bring it back. This is the album cover I told you I would tell you a little more about him. This is David Tc Ellis, who founded the High School for Recording Arts. It's appropriate to mention him because I know Essence Festival was just happening and Prince was in town. TC grew up knowing Prince and got a record deal through Prince with Warner Brothers Records. And he toured with Prince and George Clinton and all these other people. And that was his career up to a point. I never knew this, but when Prince changed his name to The Symbol, all the artists that were on the record label with him got dropped. And that was when TC had to go and open a studio in St. Paul. And that was the studio I was telling you about that he formed his school out of. But think about the swagger and the audacity and the way he was agitating within the system in Minnesota. This is right on the front end of the whole charter movement in Minnesota, the school's a charter. That this guy who had dropped out of high school himself, who hadn't been trained as an educator, said, you know what, I think I'm going to open a school in my recording studio, right? I mean, that is a really bold thing to feel like you'd have that confidence, like I'm going to just do it and wait for someone to stop me. But that's exactly what he did, and that has led to so many young people's lives being changed by this school.